The Ambiguity of Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington's philosophy of uplift through submission of blacks to whites in power might very well have had the best interests of blacks at the heart of it, as Lewis R. Harlan vouches in his book Booker T. Washington and the Politics of Accommodation. But even he concedes that this was oftentimes not the case. Donald Spivey, however, is adamantly scathing in his criticism of Washington in his book, Shine Booker Shine, The Black Overseer of Tuskegee. In response to the question, did Booker T. Washington's philosophy and actions betray the interests of African Americans? Spivey answers in the affirmative, contending that in Washington's quest to encourage blacks to model their thoughts and lives in a way that would be pleasing and least problematic to the whites, he relegated them to positions of second-class citizens. Although one might be forgiven in thinking that Spivey's views sometimes sound a bit like the ramblings of an embittered student of the Tuskegee Institute, his claims cannot be easily dismissed. Born in 1856 to a slave in Western Virginia, it is probable that Washington's origin contributed somewhat to shaping his ideology of those who prove themselves antagonistic would remain powerless or be annihilated. Those who prove themselves of value would be rewarded. Washington's goal was to make the students of Tuskegee Institute, a black school he founded with the help of white philanthropists, quote, superb laborers, totally reliable, end quote. According to Spivey, in his tireless efforts to please the dominant white society, Washington planned to produce blacks who would be the best labor in the world. To this end, there was total exclusion of the academic in the school curriculum. Frustrated instructors like Leslie Hill, who refused to accept the second-class status of academic studies at Tuskegee, were fired on the grounds of being hostile to the educational philosophy of the school. Although the school was vigilant in curbing what was considered insubordinate and indiscreet actions by students, it was notoriously deficient in allowing students to graduate without even having finished a trade course. Washington failed to fulfill his promise of producing, quote, the best labor in the world. A report stated that positions for manual skills had become open to the blacks in the South. However, the students were not properly prepared for these jobs. Ironically, all his zealousness was able to achieve was to alienate many of his Tuskegee students and faculty members and never gained the full support of the white South. Lewis R. Harlan holds the view that Washington's philosophy did not betray African Americans and purports that he was a genuine black leader. Harlan does not hesitate, however, to acknowledge the controversy that surrounds Washington and the ultimate riddle of his character. He recounts that in trying to find his niche, Washington had a brief stint with teaching, studied in a Baptist seminary, took a shot at working in a law office, and taught at Hampton Institute for 2 years before finally founding Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute in Alabama in 1881. Washington's restless aspirations for leadership came to fruition with his 1895 speech, known as the Atlanta Compromise Address, with which, quote, he sought to disarm the white South by declaring agitation of the social equality question the merest folly, end quote. When Washington took on this leadership role, he might have indeed wanted to help ease the yoke of blacks in the society, and yet some of his later actions belied this notion. Undisputedly, Washington made Tuskegee Institute the largest and best supported institution of his day, and the use of the school as the base of operations of what came to be known as the Tuskegee Machine. His political activities, however, could at best be described as dubious. Although not a member of the Afro-American Council, his lieutenants so tightly controlled the council that it never passed an action or resolution not in Washington's interest. Despite actively discouraging upwardly mobile black men from seeking political office, Washington was not averse to ingratiating himself to various politicians. He became the chief black advisor to both Presidents Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. He managed to secure federal jobs for his machine lieutenants and wielded considerable influence on some key political appointments. He nonetheless failed to positively influence many of the Republican policies, and during this period, relations between the party and blacks actually deteriorated. Admittedly, one can argue that Spivey's bitter renunciation of Washington is one-sided, since no credit is given for what he did manage to accomplish. One is hard-pressed, however, in disputing Harlan, who is on the other end of the spectrum. He opines that Washington's philosophy benefited blacks, and yet he also admits to Washington's duplicity in various instances. This helps give credence to the fact that Washington's philosophy did more harm than good for black people. It is a shame that a man of Washington's potential failed to take advantage of the opportunities accorded him to be a genuine black leader. It is my opinion that he took advantage of and manipulated the very people he professed to want to help. He betrayed them by undermining their wishes to improve themselves and ended up treating them like things. Most of the current wrongly preconceived prejudices and beliefs could very well have aired themselves out by now or improved at a faster pace, but for the hindering effect in the person of Booker T. Washington. It is unfortunate that black men especially have had to bear the brunt of these repercussions. It saddens me that there are so few blacks taking this class, because I believe that studying history is one way in which truth can be unraveled in order to make appropriate choices for the future, and thereby not repeat the mistakes of the past, such as trusting the word of unscrupulous people like Booker T. Washington.